Welcome back.
Welcome.
Been a minute. So we were just talking before. We've got to catch up a little bit to get where we're going to go today. So we'll jump right in. I know you were gone this past week. You were gallivanting all over the old country, all over Europe.
Old country. That's exactly right.
I told you too. Like, it's crazy the difference in like the amount of history that they have versus what we have.
It's crazy. We flew to Amsterdam last Monday, and then spent 3 nights in Amsterdam, and then went to London. So the first part of that was with Convoy of Hope. So we went kind of representing, but then the 3 nights in London we had an 18-hour layover in London. So that was just kind of our, okay, so that was the cheapest flight. So it's like, if we choose this, maybe we'll just have a little time in London. But then, let's just extend it. So we extended it a couple days. And
awesome.
So we were able to see some historical sites. There's a few of them over there, you know. Yeah,
and I was in London the week before.
Oh, yeah.
And France and India and China. I was all over the place in Epcot.
Oh, in Epcot.
Yeah, my family went to Disney the week before, and so I was out that week.
I was trying to figure out what you're talking about.
So
I love Epcot.
Yeah, it was fun. It was good. Yeah. Had a great time with family, and lots of good memories. But so we have been all over.
Yeah.
And we've missed you guys.
Making memories.
Yeah. So it's been a few weeks since we have been into the podcast. I guess we can call this
room.
The
and the red chairs.
If we were official, it would be a studio.
Yeah, that's right.
But we're not. We're not. We're just hanging out. We're just trying to make things work. But thanks for tuning in. And we know that you are here because you want to dive deeper into the scriptures and not just to hear us talk. Maybe to hear you talk. I don't know.
No. They're not here to hear us talk.
Yep. Yeah. All the comments, all the rates and the reviews are coming from, give us more Darren.
Yes.
Give us more Darren.
Yeah.
So I love it.
Yeah. Sure.
All right. So we know this past Sunday, we were in chapter 25. We're going to back up just a little bit since it's been a few weeks since we have uploaded a new podcast. Jump into why we are in chapter 25. And then we're going to hopefully get to a place, because honestly, what we shared this past Sunday was really a prelude to what's going to be talking about this coming Sunday.
Yeah.
And so go ahead and tell us where we're going to be this coming Sunday, and then we'll back up to get to that place.
So this Sunday, we're in the remainder of 25, which is basically the setup for 26. It can all go together. This could
which is a setup for 27.
Chapter, which is, So 26 is going to kind of end this section.
Yeah.
Because Paul is finally going to, he had 2 objectives. And God told him in jail, or when Jesus stood beside him, said, "You have ministered to me, you have witnessed to me about me in Jerusalem. You're going to witness in Rome." So when we get past 26, then Paul is going to be sent to Rome. But the crazy thing about the whole thing, even going back to 23, is 23 to 26 is Paul in jail.
Yep.
And in Jerusalem and in Caesarea.
Right.
And then the different visitors that come to see him, and also that kind of pull him out of jail, interview him, send him back to jail, and nothing's accomplished. Also, no charges are brought against him. There's nothing. They're literally just holding him unjustly.
Yeah. And
he goes before Felix, which is the Roman governor, who then leaves, and now Festus is the Roman governor. Yeah. King Agrippa and Agrippa's sister, wife.
Weird scenario being played out there.
Excuse me. So they're the major characters in 26.
Yeah.
And so you have Festus and you have Agrippa and Paul. But it's the same theme. And we've been talking about this, how difficult it is to, quote, build a sermon on these chapters when it's
You feel like you're saying the
basically
same thing every week.
Like
Yeah.
I said one thing, and then Chad said the same thing, and then I'll say the same thing, and it's like, oh boy, so it's a little difficult. You don't want to.
It's a lot of looking into the thesaurus and saying, what's another word I can use for saying the same thing?
Yeah, exactly. And so what we've been doing a lot of is reminding ourselves, because honestly, I think that Paul was doing the same thing. Reminding himself of the faithfulness of God, reminding himself of the sovereignty of God, that no matter what is happening, God is still trustworthy. He's still faithful, even though my circumstances are not reflective of what the world says God should do. God is still faithful, and he's good, and he's just, and he's mighty. And the crazy thing that we keep reminding ourselves of when we talk about the faithfulness and the sovereignty of God is that, okay, not only does God allow these things to happen, but the hard thing a lot of times for us is God is divinely appointing these things to happen. And that can mess with us when we're looking out and when we're speaking of these things. Paul left in prison alone a lot of times. They did make allowances. I think a couple weeks ago we talked about they made allowances where his friends could come and visit him, but still he's in jail. When these things happen to us and it seems like God does not respond, when God allows things to happen, that's one thing. Like, God, why didn't you stop that from happening?
Right.
You could have stopped that from happening. Okay, that's one aspect that can be difficult for us as followers. But on the other hand, to say, God, did you make this happen?
Right.
And that's the hard part for us, because we're not so far removed from things that we don't feel that. And one of these days in heaven, obviously, we're going to look back and say, oh, I get it. I see that. And I don't feel that pain anymore. So I can objectively, however much God allows us to see in heaven, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But right now, when it's a subjective type thing of, God, you could do something and you didn't. And also you did this to me. You allowed this circumstance, but then you created this circumstance that I walked through that was very hard.
Yeah.
It was difficult. It was not just challenging and, oh, wow, that was tough. But I'm talking about very, very difficult things that people we know are walking through or have walked through when we know that God could have had a different outcome.
Yeah.
Or God could have done it differently. And so that's why we have to we must trust in the fact that we can trust God in his kindness, his faithfulness, his goodness, his mercy. But at the same time, God is advancing his kingdom on this earth. And those of us who say, yes, sign me up to follow God, follow Jesus wherever it goes, we know that he will use us as utensils to further his kingdom.
Yeah.
And whether that brings hardship, whether that brings loss, or whether it brings what we call blessings, we're here for it every time, because where else can we go?
Well, I think one of the most interesting things about this whole conversation is we can look at Paul's situation or even our circumstance when we see ourselves in tough trials, tribulations, all that kind of stuff, is say, God, the reason I'm here is because I obeyed you.
Yeah.
And that's that's what brought this on. That's why Paul is in prison, is because he did what God had told him to do. Yeah. It can be so easy to push the blame off of God and say, well, yeah, I could understand when hardship comes to people who aren't obeying you. Yeah. Why is that? Yeah. Why is that not the case? And so we begin to question God, or can begin to question God of, God, this doesn't seem fair. This doesn't seem just. This doesn't make sense to me. Yeah. But Paul is in the middle of a situation where he is falsely accused for several things. Yeah. But then just kind of spent time just in the middle of, he could have been going and doing and preaching and all spreading the gospel like he'd been called to, but he found himself just sitting still in prison for 2+ years. So
it's tough, and I don't understand, and that's the beauty of it. Because if I was in charge, then I would screw everything up because I would do things my way. But knowing that God is in charge is what we rest in, we rely on, we know, man. And that's the crazy thing. People will ask us, well, how can you follow God when, or how can you trust in a God that allows this to happen? Or how can you, if God is so good, then why does, and so, because we're so temporary focused, that we forget that there's a much bigger eternal picture going on that's happening around us. And that was one thing, anytime I'm away from my home area, whether that be in another city or another country, I'm reminded of how large everything is, know, and the need for the gospel is so great in our own community, in our zip code, and in the surrounding zip codes, and the major cities that we have here in the United States. People are in the cities, and then when you go around the world, it's just like, man, it is anywhere you could point your finger, anywhere you could open a map and put your finger, you will find souls that have never heard the gospel, never heard the name of Jesus, never heard it in a way, especially in a way of salvation. Right. So, instead of just saying, okay, God, why is this happening? Or what are you doing? Man, it would be so much better for us to say, okay, what do you want me to do in the middle of this, or in the midst of this, or wherever it is? If you want to send me away or keep me in my home, or whatever it is. So there's a lot of great things, even in the midst of, like we keep reminding ourselves that Eugene Peterson, that the faithfulness is just a long direction. It's just I can't remember the quote is now, but it's just heading in the same direction for a long time. And that's what we're called to do, no matter what comes at us or what's thrown at us. So that's the reminder for me in these chapters where it's like, good grief, man. I think I put in my notes for this week, not once did Paul say, hey, God, we're kind of wasting time here. Yeah. We could be doing a lot more. Yeah. I'm willing to do whatever. I'll go wherever. I'll be persecuted, whatever. But I could be doing a lot more if I were out of jail. He doesn't do that. He doesn't. And how do you get to that place? Is the question. How do you get to that place that you are willing? When Paul said, when he wrote, "I am content. I've learned to be content in whatever situation I'm in," like he did. So
yeah. Okay, so let's jump into a little bit of maybe what was covered this past week. And so when we see the transition of power between Felix to Festus, it's interesting. So in preparation for the message that I gave this past week, I had told you, and I even told the services on Sunday, like I was really struggling trying to find applications. A lot of teaching, not a lot of preaching kind of things. Preaching to me is the application, and that way it drives it home. Yeah. And so there's a lot of teaching. And in that teaching is some things that we can possibly read in between the lines of, I wonder why this happened, or this is maybe the reason why they acted this way or said this thing. And so and part of that was, I wonder why Felix was replaced. Because you have Festus that comes in. And we spent some time talking about why he did some of the things that he did or didn't do, or maybe question, or why did he need to get, all these other people's opinions. And anyway, so it was, to me, it's like, I wonder why, what was the reasoning why Felix left the scene and Festus comes on the scene?
Yeah.
So
I don't know. Being replaced, removed. Yeah.
Yeah. Or time, or upgrade to the next position, or power, or I don't know what it was. Yeah. So not a lot is recorded in those regards, but we do have some records of Festus and his rule. Felix seemed to be a little bit more of a lackluster ruler, and then Festus comes on the scene. We have some good reports of Festus. Yeah. So I made the point on Sunday that Festus comes in and seems to be like ready and wanting to do a good job, because really quickly he jumps from Caesarea, which is the headquarters, into Jerusalem. And Jerusalem, of course, he gets into the barrage of these Jewish leaders who are death threats against Paul still after all this time, after 2+ years.
All this time.
It's like, in me, I'm thinking, why are they not happy with Paul just being left in prison?
Yeah, he's quiet. Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, they were so adamant about his death.
It shows the evil. I think it's also it kind of completes that timeline, not timeline, but that what Jesus said, that they're going to hate me.
Yeah.
And they're going to hate you because they hated me.
Yeah.
And that deep-seated hate, just doesn't go away.
Yeah.
And also I think not Paul's followers, but Paul's disciples who were following Jesus, they're still active.
Yeah, they want to make an example out of Paul to silence his followers.
Yeah.
I may be wrong in this, but I could see Paul still being effective while in prison.
It's like a mobster, he's like calling hits.
Yeah,
from jail,
that's right. Yeah. Except,
like he's arranging revival meetings.
Yeah. So I don't know if, we know he has friends in Caesarea. Mm-hmm. That's where he left from because he felt God called him to Jerusalem to take the gospel. And they're the ones who are like, no, you're going to be arrested. And so don't go. We want to keep you here. We want to keep you safe or whatever. And so we know he has friends there. So I don't know if they had access to him, but, maybe possibly.
Yeah.
And maybe he was slipping some letters to him through the jail cell or whatever the case may be. So I kind of think that he was being effective in the ministry still while in prison, even though he wasn't able to be out and about preaching, but still being able to be effective, which that's probably a whole sermon there.
I think so. You think about like even the early churches that were started in the cities when they would receive a letter from Paul,
right?
When they would receive word from Paul, there was something about it back then. Hearing his voice or hearing his words or he's still alive, he's this, he's that, was very encouraging. And we know that people did visit him,
right?
Had access to him. They didn't hinder those.
It's interesting too, because in 24 it says that Felix had sent for him often and conversed with him, even during this time period too.
Yeah.
So he had some sort of access to the governor, which is really interesting. I don't know if, Felix was responding to the gospel anyway, if he was moving in that direction or not. But it's interesting to note that he had access to him.
Yeah.
Well,
we see in these Roman governors an intrigue. And even in Agrippa this week.
Well, yeah, I'm about to say that kind of seems to be a big pull for
they're
there.
intrigued, like, okay, first of all, who is this guy that would do these things? And even you find out there's so many little things. So many little.
There's tons of tiny little things.
Like even this week, Festus says to Agrippa, like, you know what, we really could have let him go, but he appealed to Caesar.
Yeah.
So we kind of have to keep him. It's like, these guys don't know. They're intrigued by him. It's like a circus show almost. And I think with Agrippa it was. I think Felix and Festus did not understand the culture, but they were intrigued by the culture. Like maybe they tell us more about the past. Tell us about Jesus. He was the one who was known to lay down his life for his people instead of rising to the top. They were intrigued by this servanthood and then displaying in the disciples, like in Paul. Yeah. Man, these people they're really in.
Whereas Agrippa knew all about Jesus.
Yeah.
Because of his family lineage that had dealt with specifically Jesus and his cousin and all the things.
You can imagine the stories that were handed down among that kingly heritage from Herod and, about Jesus.
Well, even in one of the things that we'll talk about this Sunday is Paul's, I can't remember the exact word, but he says, like, as you well know, Agrippa.
As you well know.
Yeah.
Like, you believe.
Yeah, you know the story. You know
the prophets, right?
Jesus, yeah.
Yeah, I know you believe the prophets.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I would just love to have been there to see Paul, because people describe Paul, even one commentator I was reading today described him as bald-headed and smaller in stature, which I don't know, you know, and maybe even kind of squirrely. Like he was, but when he's in 26 anyway, he's very calm, very conversational. By now, he's hanging out with governors and kings, and he's hanging out with everybody. It's no big deal, It's like he's just It's to know the day in the office.
Yeah, to me, it comes across as very like he's just at peace.
Yeah.
Which I kind of related back to, Matthew chapter 10, where Jesus is given the prophecy of you're going to go before kings and governors and like all these things, being able to, it's like, man, if I were to, but it's the Spirit that's leading. You're not going to know what to say, but the Spirit's going to speak for you. And I think to me it's a perfect example of allowing the Spirit to work through you and speak through you and to do the work when we're just simply obedient and saying, okay, God, whatever that door is, whenever that I see that crack in that door, I'm walking through that door to obey.
It's like so many people have said, like, ministering for Jesus, working for Jesus, it's easy. It's like, wait a minute, not the in jail part,
sure,
but just the taking every opportunity to speak for him, because they're going to come.
Yeah, if
we'll just step up and step out.
Yeah.
So, what would you say? Going through part of 24 into 25. What stood out to you, like, as you're developing this message and you're delivering it, and like we said at the beginning, kind of digging to find what's under the surface? What were some things that you would say stood out to you from this passage as you were delivering it?
Yeah,
preparing to deliver it.
I think the biggest thing for me was I wonder what that 2 years looked like for Paul. Like, I think sometimes we can say, kind of what we were saying at the beginning, like, God, I have followed you, I have done what you've commanded to do, and now it seems like nothing is happening. Like, just everything has come to a halt. But yet Paul didn't act like that at all. It was, sometimes we focus on our problems.
That was a big one. Yeah.
And he doesn't seem to be focused with where he was.
Yeah.
He trusted in God's providential care of him and of that the gospel go forth, and that he just continued to focus on God's purpose. So my thing was, we've continue to focus on God's purpose instead of our problems.
Man, that's
we get we get so wrapped up in the day-to-day stuff that our problems seem to be so overwhelming that everything we do or think is because of our problems. We stay comfortable because of our problems, or we protect because of our problems, or, whatever the case may be. And he was just solely focused on, okay, God, if this is what you have for me right now, okay. I'm just continuing to do whatever I can in order to make sure that the gospel goes out. So God's purpose for me is right now, I'm going to live that out instead of focusing on the problems of, I'm in prison, I can't believe I'm here, or I'm questioning, or, so to me, that was the biggest part of 24 into 25. And then it's like, once Festus got in, then it just started rolling. It's like you're standing before a new governor and then the king and giving your testimony. It's like, okay, maybe that's why.
Yeah.
Because I've been doing ministry and I have not yet spoken before a mayor, or, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like, okay, God was using Paul. He had called Paul separate, to do a specific work. And he was just trusting in God's provision for him.
What do you think are some qualities that, because we know what Paul has been through. We've been watching, man, for the last however many weeks of studying Acts, we're getting to know Paul really well. What are some things in Paul's life do you think led to this point to where you think about humility and think about the servant? What are some things that are what are qualities of Paul that we see in these times compared to when he's boldly preaching and boldly this and boldly that, but now he's content and humble?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think I just see a contentment in him. And I had said the phrase on Sunday, and I may have gotten a little bit of pushback from him, but I don't really care.
Heresy?
No, I didn't get a heresy.
Nobody called heresy.
Of course, I didn't ask for it either. You usually ask for it.
I had people placed it ready.
No, so there is, when you're in the center of God's will, there's no more joy and no more safety that comes to you. Some people would look at, Paul wasn't really safe.
Yeah.
But let's look at the situation. If Paul was not in prison, he would have been, and this kind of plays into the scenario of
crazy
why he appealed to Caesar, of he really was safe. You know, he wouldn't have chosen prison, I don't think, but his life was safe because he had obeyed God. We look at it, it was like he was in prison. Well, yeah, he was in prison, and he was also protected by the Roman government.
Yeah.
You know, again, not that he would have chosen that, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think he would have been much as rather out and preaching and on his way to Rome.
Yeah.
But he was just being obedient, and that was the situation. Not nonchalant, like, oh, whatever happens, happens. You know, nothing like that, but just content in his situation of, this is where I am, this is where God has me. I'm going to fight. I think he knew his rights as a citizen of Rome, and he was using those avenues, but also he knew what he believed in as a follower of Jesus Christ, and stood on those beliefs as well. So there was a couple things in there, but yeah, I think those are kind of the main things.
So that statement, because as you were saying it, it's like contentment doesn't necessarily mean comfort. Paul wasn't comfortable.
I don't think so.
But he was content.
Yep.
You know, but at the same time, I agree with you. He was in the safest place he could be. It's like, you know what? If you let me go, they're gonna have to hide me away, or I'm gonna have to leave town or whatever. Go back to the statement that you made that you got pushback from, and we will consistently get pushback from. But I don't want to finish it for you. But being in the will of God is the safest place you can be, or is that kind of what you were?
Yeah, it's the safest and most joyous place that you can be.
So okay. So that then when we define the term safe, we kind of understand joyous. Okay, yeah, sure, yay. But when you talk about safety, being in the will of God, and being in the will of God is the safest place you can be, what does that look like?
I don't know what it looks like. I will say this, though. I think I know what it doesn't look like. Planning our future.
Oh, okay.
I think anytime we plan our future, that's when we get in trouble.
Okay.
In regards to this world or this kingdom, when we begin to plan our future and setting up ourselves to be at a good place in this world, that's where things can get a little upside down. So I don't know what it does look like, but I do think that that's where some of the tension begins, is in just preparing for the future, a future life here.
So when we say I've got my life planned out and it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
4 years of college,
yeah,
purchase a house, get married. Like here's all my dreams and aspirations, and this is the direction and plan that I want to go in. And by this time, I want to be this financially secure, and I want to have. I think that's where we get in trouble of planning out, because I think God calls us to be uprooted and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And, I'm not saying to be irresponsible with finances or to go live under a bridge because you don't want to get into a mortgage. That's just stupid and dumb.
Don't go to college.
Right.
Yeah.
But when we start making those plans and we don't think, I wonder what the creator of the universe has to say about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or our prayers look like, God, help me to get a good job, or, help me to get into this college that I really want to get into, or,
because I have these plans,
or marry this person, or buy this house, or car, have all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like we try to get God onto our side. Like, don't you think that I would make a huge difference in this area that I want instead of praying the prayers. So I think that's what it kind of looks like, or maybe doesn't look like.
Does that ever end in our life? Because we kind of go back and say to students, college students, high school students, you need to find God's will for your life. Does that ever end for us?
Finding God's will for our life?
Or seeking God's will?
No, I mean, it shouldn't.
Yeah.
It shouldn't. We should constantly be thinking of the things of this world continue to go strangely dim. And the allure of this life and the comforts or the position or anything of this world just to continually be our driving force. I don't know. If you really have the perspective of God, I don't know that it makes a whole lot of sense, but yet we are kind of right in the middle of this world. And so that's what we're surrounded with unless we're focused on eternity.
I think that's when we ask the question, why didn't Paul say, get me out of jail? Or God, hey, that's it. Because when we're trusting him for every single day and we're not making our own plans.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't mean that we sit around and say, I'm not going to take a shower today. I'm not going to brush my teeth. I'm not going to go to work because I'm waiting for God to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Paul didn't do that either. Paul was busy about the kingdom, about the Lord's work, but then he found himself in a place where he couldn't do what he thought he was supposed to be doing.
Right.
And that's where the contentment comes from.
And I don't think Paul was being absent-minded about that either. I think he knew God's calling and God's purpose on his life, and he weighed out the scenarios. I really do. I think he weighed out the scenarios. Okay, if I go to Jerusalem, there is a good chance that, because it was talked about, that I will get ambushed on the way and I will be killed.
Yeah.
Even if I make it, I'm going to go before a court system in Jerusalem that is up against me, and I don't know that I'm going to have a fair trial.
Yeah.
And so they're going to sentence me to death. Or if I do pass that and then I'm released, I'm going to have people releasing me in Jerusalem, and those people that maybe missed the ambush the first time, they're going to get me the second time. So I think he was weighing his options, but it was not based off of his safety. It was based upon God's calling on his life of, you will be a witness for me in Rome.
In Rome. You're going to go to Rome.
And so that was his driving force, because he told Festus, like, it doesn't matter if I have done nothing wrong, but if there is anything that I've done wrong, I'm not seeking to save my life. Yeah. Everybody else kind of had their own agenda. You have the Jews they had their own agenda seeking to kill Paul.
Right.
You had the agenda of Festus, keep the peace, trying to appease everybody, make the Jews happy. Acting like he cared and wanted to give Paul the option. Don't you really want to just go? I mean, if you're really innocent, like I think that you are, you should just go ahead and be. Well, he just wanted to wash his hands of it and be rid of it. So Paul is like, it's not really my life to give or to take, but I've done nothing wrong. I'm not willing to try to risk saving my life, but have at it. That's what you want. But I know that I've been called to Rome. And so that's what his driving force was.
2 weeks ago, I had talked about the calculated risks, and that very thing, Paul knowing, okay, so taking risk, everywhere he went was taking a risk, but then there's calculated risks. And when we live our lives we're living our lives based on calculated risks. That's what we're doing. Okay, I know that if I go this place, if I do this, if I do that, I'm calculating the cost associated with doing a certain thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we begin to live our lives that way, saying, I'll take certain risks because I've calculated those costs and I know how much it costs and I'm willing to pay that amount.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not monetary payment, or it may be, but I'm willing to take that risk because I can consume the risk and the cost.
Yeah.
It's those escalated risks that I'm not willing to do because I can't calculate those risks. I can't calculate the cost. But that's that David Platt comment that said, if we're not following Jesus and making him known on the earth, we're probably not following Jesus and making him known on the earth.
Yep.
It's like this life following Christ will come with its own set of risks. And are we willing to do those, to take uncalculated risks? To say, I don't know the outcome and I don't know what will happen to me or my family or my future or my finances or whatever, but I'm going, I'm doing.
And that's a great way of saying it. What does a calculated risk look like for us today? Because we all have those opportunities to further the gospel, to preach, but not from a pulpit, to make the gospel go out. So what does that look like? Well, a lot of times we look at the shame or the humiliation that's whether it's at the workplace or school or wherever it may be. That's the risk. We're weighing it out. Do I speak up? Do I stand up for what I say I believe in, or take on this risk of, I may be ostracized, or I may be subjected to isolation, or whatever the case may be. For us, it's constantly calculating the risk of, okay, well, the gospel has to go forward, but then we always weigh out that. But I also and I think here's probably part of the lie of, but I'm just planting. I just want to plant seeds. And maybe I don't want to be the one, who waters and one who reaps. And, so there's all these things that are going through my mind. So we tend to we do just enough to make sure in our minds that we can say, okay, I've done my part.
Yeah.
But we never push it any further to be really risky. But we always caveat it with, let's see. Trying to think of this scenario in my mind. I don't want to risk the relationship or future opportunities, or for them to get mad at me and cut me off. And it's like,
so I'm going to withhold what I should say or do.
Right. I'm just going to share a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's dangerous too, because I think it appeases us just enough.
Yeah.
Say, I've done my job. I've done what I was supposed to do. And now I'm going to pass it off to pray that somebody else comes in along. And I think that's risky too. I don't see that with Paul. I don't see that when he's speaking to Festus or Felix giving his. I mean, he lays it out with Agrippa this coming week and just kind of say, here's everything.
Here's the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm fascinated and I'm moved and I'm challenged. Going through Acts has moved me so many times, challenged me, encouraged me. Man, I asked our leadership team, what's our next risk? Like as a church, okay, personally speaking, but as a church, what are we willing to risk? Where are we willing to go? Where are we willing to step out in faith and say? And it usually for me, it doesn't come down to, I believe God wants us to build this building and buy this and do financial, okay, whatever. But I mean, literally saying, what is God calling us to do or to be a part of that is a huge risk as a church to challenge and push and send, and I don't know what that is. We talk about it all the time, like sending people out, and churches are notorious for seeking to build up and build themselves up and build in their membership and the bottom line and the seats and the all of that. But what if the risk is we're going to send out?
Yeah.
What if the risk is we can't do what we did last year because we are investing this much money into this church plant or this mission field, or I don't even know.
Yeah.
But constantly saying, what's the next risk that God is calling us to do, knowing that being content with everything or nothing or in the middle.
Yeah.
You know, I struggle with that.
Yeah. I think, well, I'll mention this. I think a lot of times when it comes to our relationship with God, we're like, man, it would be so much better if our relationship with God, my relationship with God, if Jesus was right there with me and I was able to, well, be careful with that because he appeared to Paul.
Yeah.
And he calls him to risky things in those times.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That was just another thought that I had in this too was, you know, we so many times desire to do or to consume a relationship with God that we just want those easy fixes or things. If we could just fix this, then this would be open to us. But it's like, you better be careful what you ask for, because if Jesus were to show up, he would probably beat you into submission, you know.
Or take your little risk and multiply it. And
that's right. So one thing that I did not get into this a whole lot this past Sunday was how interesting it is to see how Paul is being treated here and how Jesus was treated right before his crucifixion. Have you seen those parallels?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just even in the conversations that he has being brought before these governors and you're innocent, pass you off.
Yeah.
And it's just to me, it's so,
him.
Yeah. And some of the wording even that's being used is identical to that of Jesus. And I'm thinking I wonder if that's clicking. You know, Paul's had conversations with these disciples who were there and heard.
Yeah.
Maybe not firsthand because the disciples weren't right there because they had fled. But anyway, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like they had heard the stories from all these people and these eyewitness accounts of what Jesus, and I wonder if it's sparking in Paul's mind that how very similar these are.
You wonder if he is feeling like I feel very close to Jesus right now, knowing that I'm not standing maybe in the same court that he stood in, but in the same way as he stood, I'm standing. And how cool is that? Especially for Paul, you know, who had no other thought in this life except to preach Christ and him crucified. And then now he's standing in these same places awaiting, you know, it's unbelievable.
And the fact that Agrippa wants to hear Paul, to me, is blown away. Man. That he literally asked, I think I'd like to hear about.
I want to hear
from him. To me, it blows my mind.
In
that somebody of his caliber, both good and bad, king, but also who he is, wants to hear Paul. And I think if we live our lives in such a way and speak in such a way, I'm not saying it's attractional, but people are going to notice that there's something different. And there is I wonder what it is about this person. Like there is that intrigue. Maybe that's the word. There's this intrigue about that individual.
The big risk takers often get attention because people are intrigued by them because it's a show, but also deep down in all of us who have this desire to do something crazy and to take a big risk. When we see somebody else doing it, there's an automatic like, I wonder what that feels like to feel that adrenaline. You say that Holy Spirit adrenaline that rushes through us when we attempt great things for God. And I wonder if Agrippa, who was probably bored to death he had everything. And he hears about this guy, and for entertainment purposes, bring him out. Let's hear from him, you know. And then he finds this humble, meek, strong, wiry servant of Jesus, and he is very intrigued by him. And so, I mean, this in chapter 26 is interesting, man. But to me, it's so like, wow, that was so cool. But in another way, it's so sad because people, like you said, people are searching for something, and they don't know what they're searching for until they see it. And then when they see it, then it's like when you come face to face with Jesus, a decision has to be made. I mean, either you're going to follow him or you're going to reject him.
Yeah.
There is no neutral persuasion when you come face to face with Jesus.
Right.
It's either follow him or walk away from him.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Agrippa was self-sufficient so much that he did not need anything from Jesus and did not understand his own spiritual state because he was so evil and vile.
Yeah.
But that's the world we live in. They don't know. And so we'll talk about this Sunday that Paul's message dealt with the illumination and giving the gospel but also the rejection of the gospel. But we're called to deliver. We're called to share and then let God do his work.
It's not up to us.
And it's good. I appreciate your willingness to jump in and dive in and dig, and I hope that you were encouraged. In that passage, because it was a tough one.
It was an experience.
It wasn't. We have, if you're listening or watching, we laid out a sermon calendar for the Book of Acts, and then we've revised it. I don't know how many times now. A bunch of times, and even moved weeks and added, and it's like because we're trying to navigate through this series of Acts. And then also, 1 week we didn't have electricity here, and so we combined 2 weeks. And so there is there's a beauty, there is a diligence in going through a book like this, and our prayer for all of us and for you listening, watching, is that we are learning the discipline of study and the discipline of seeking and finding and then growing through that. So we only have a few more left.
Yeah. And it's on to something else. And
it's coming down to
dig and grow through that too, right? Because it don't ever stop.
The other night, they're like, "Where are we going after this?" And I said, "I don't even know." I'm trying to sprint to the finish line with Acts, but at the same time, I don't know where we're going to go next. So it's exciting though.
Cool. Yeah. All right. So verses 1 through, 25, 23.
Yeah. Chapter 25, verse 23.
Yep.
We're just going to read that. We won't expound much on that because it's just an intro. How Agrippa, and then we'll do all of 26, and it's going to, Agrippa's going to ask the question, and in the King James, almost thou persuadest me, and it's almost, to me, it's like a lot of commentators feel that's the best words. The King James presents it the best way, even though we use the ESV in a literal way, a little bit easier to understand, but almost thou persuadest me to become a Christian. Wow. It's just fascinating, that how many people are interested in Jesus, and they're interested in things of Jesus, and they're intrigued by Jesus, but they're not following Jesus. Yeah. And I think there's a difference. Even people in our churches that fill in that category. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
It's going to be a good one. I can't wait. This is going to be so good. It's that apologetic. It's that here's the story. Here's my testimony. It's clear call to the gospel. It is.
Man, it's every
which
time
is interesting. I don't know why it's different.
It's different.
I mean, I know why it's different, but it's fun.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, we're going to end it. See you Sunday.
Okay. I'll be there.
All right, me too. See ya.
See ya.